Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's workshop on the Track 5A issues in the TNC Access for All proceeding, or R.19-02-012. My name is Tara Curtis. I supervise the Transportation Analysis section at the CPUC, and I'm joined by Anna Jew and Reagan Roxford, who are our regulatory analysts leading the implementation of the Access for All program. We'll be facilitating today's workshop. And in just a few minutes, I will turn it over to Commissioner Shiroma for a few opening remarks. Before we get there, I'd like to cover a few basic housekeeping items. Anna, if you could change to that slide, thank you. So the purpose of today's workshop is to discuss the Track 5A issues in R.19-02-012 and gain an understanding of parties' proposals. You are welcome and encouraged to ask questions of one another. We will have some questions of our own for clarification of parties' proposals that we've seen so far. But please consider this an opportunity to create dialogue. We'd also ask that you save questions for the end of presentations. We'll have a mix of presentation and then discussion sessions. Audio will be opened for the Q&A, open discussion, and public comment portions of the agenda, and please be on mute during presentations unless you're speaking. We will also be monitoring the chat box. If you cannot use the chat box or raise hand feature, which is in the lower bar of your screen, if you need assistance during the workshop, you can also contact us at tncaccess@cpuc.ca.gov. We'll be monitoring that inbox during the workshop as well. So please let us know if you can't hear us or see the slides anytime during the presentation. This meeting is being recorded, and all presentations and the recording will be posted on the website after the workshop, cpuc.ca.gov/TNC-access. Closed captioning is also available for this meeting. To enable or disable this feature, you'll see a CC icon in the lower left of your screen. If it is filled in or dark, that means it's on and you should be able to see the closed captions. If it's not filled in, then you won't see the closed captions. Please let us know if you need help using that feature. And if you have any additional questions after the workshop, you can also contact us at that email address, tncaccess@cpuc.ca.gov. Now, just give you a brief overview of the agenda for the day. So we're kicking it off. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Shiroma in just a minute. We will then present a summary of our CPD staff proposal. And we'll turn it over to a few parties who volunteered to present on their proposals around 9:20 this morning. And we'll have an opportunity for question and answer clarification questions after the series of presentations. And then we'll take a short break mid-morning. Thereafter, there's a series of sessions organized around the issues in the scoping memo. And this is to provide an opportunity for substantive discussion on the issues and party proposals. We have an opportunity for public comments at the end, about 35 minutes. If we get through everything else faster than scheduled, we will open the public comment early, but we won't end before 1 in case anyone has been planning to dial in around the published agenda schedule. So there should be at least 35 minutes for public comment at the end. Okay, let me turn it over to Commissioner Shiroma.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tara. My name is Genevieve Shiroma, and I am the assigned commissioner for this proceeding. My pronouns are she, her. Today's workshop focuses on an important topic: how to distinguish pre-scheduled rides from on-demand rides. In resolving this, we need to ensure that we adhere to the statutory language established by SB 1376, such that this program does not in any way discourage on-demand service, but also potentially provides a choice that TNCs and access providers provide pre-scheduled service that WAVE users may want and need. I would like to thank all of the parties that submitted proposals. I look forward to the discussion of this important issue. Thank you, and back to you, Tara.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I will turn it to Anna to give an overview of our staff proposal.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Ju, and I will be presenting on CPED's staff proposal. So before I go over staff's proposal, there may be some folks who may not have access to a computer or the slides in front of them. So we'll do our best to read out the questions. So CPED submitted comments on all the questions raised in Track 5A, which focuses on the issue of pre-scheduled WAVE trips. This issue was raised after recognizing pre-scheduled WAVE service was being offered, and that data on pre-scheduled WAVE trips were included in the advice letters seeking for offsets. However, since the Commission has not addressed pre-scheduled WAVE trips and or how to define pre-scheduled WAVE trips, the Commission directed parties to comment on several questions. Specifically, we addressed the topics listed on the slide, which are pre-scheduled WAVE trip definition, pre-scheduled WAVE trip response times, pre-scheduled WAVE trips eligibility, pre-scheduled framework, pre-scheduled advice letter, and reporting requirements of pre-scheduled WAVE trips. So the first question on page 7, or on this slide 7, reads, how should the Commission define a pre-scheduled WAVE trip as compared to an on-demand WAVE trip? So in the proceedings, Track 3, the Commission defined on-demand transportation as any transportation service that does not follow a fixed route and or schedule. However, since pre-scheduled WAVE trips was never defined in prior tracks, it is being addressed in this track. Commission staff takes the position to consider on-demand and pre-scheduled WAVE trips as distinct offerings. CPED recommends that the Commission modify its definition of on-demand transportation for the purpose of the Access for All Act as any unscheduled transportation service that allows customized pickup and drop-off locations. CPED further recommends pre-scheduled WAVE service as any WAVE service that allows a passenger to schedule a WAVE trip with a specific pickup time. CPED also emphasized that all trip request methods available to non-WAVE on-demand customers shall be available to pre-scheduled customers. This next question on slide 8 reads, should the adopted response time definition be applied to pre-scheduled WAVE trips? If yes, how should the definitions of periods A and B be applied? If no, how should response time be defined for pre-scheduled WAVE trips? For example, should period A be defined as the time between when the TNC dispatches a trip request to its driver pool and when a driver ultimately accepts, denies that request? Or should Or should period B be defined as the time between when a driver accepts a trip request and when the driver arrives at a passenger's pickup location. So in the proceedings track 2, in the discussion of on-demand response time definition, response time is defined as the time elapsed between when a ride was requested and when the vehicle arrived, where period A is defined as the time elapsed from when a trip is requested until the trip is accepted. And then period B is defined as the time elapsed from when a trip is accepted until the vehicle arrives. So CPD again reiterates that on-demand and pre-scheduled wave service are fundamentally different and recommends pre-scheduled wave trip performance metrics and frameworks should be separate compared to a non-pre-scheduled wave service. We also look forward to a discussion about this during the open discussion portion of the agenda, in hearing from the disability advocates or others who could represent the perspective of wave customers on how the Commission's definition should treat pre-scheduled wave trips before we adopt a response time definition, to avoid a response time calculation that would favor one model or over another. So this question on slide 9 reads, should pre-scheduled wave trips be included in the Access for All program for purposes of qualification for offsets, exemptions, access providers, and other requirements? So CPD recommends that investments made in support of pre-scheduled wave trips should be eligible for reimbursement with access funds. First, the law does not preclude pre-scheduled wave trips from receiving access funds. Secondly, we do not wish to limit the disability community from the option of scheduling a wave ride in advance, especially if a pre-scheduled trip option exists for non-wave riders. So now I'm on slide 10. This next question reads, if pre-scheduled wave trips are included in the Access for All program, should such trips be subject to different performance requirements than on-demand wave trips? If so, what performance framework or requirements should be applied? So CPD recommends pre-scheduled trips would still need to demonstrate meeting a separate performance standard to qualify for an offset or an exemption, however declines to recommend a specific performance framework metric at this time. CPD, however, recommends the Commission adopt a performance framework for pre-scheduled service that allows but does not incentivize growth of pre-scheduled wave service in a way that reduces the availability or quality of on-demand service, incentivizes on-time performance according to the requested pickup time, incentivizes a high trip completion rate, awards access fund monies proportionate to the fraction of that county's quarter's pre-scheduled on-demand service mix. So for example, if on-demand is 90% of service and pre-scheduled is 10%, then they get 90% of the requested access funds if approved. Service separates reporting for pre-scheduled and on-demand wave trips in offset and exemption request, encourages the same reporting from access providers, but not be held to the same requirements such as performance threshold as TNCs to be reimbursed for wave service. Again, for this topic, we look forward to a discussion about this during the open discussion portion of the agenda and hearing from the disability advocates or others who could represent the perspective of wave customers on how the Commission's performance framework should treat pre-scheduled wave trips before we adopt a framework. So this next question on slide 11 reads, how should previously approved advice letters that included pre-scheduled waive trips be treated? How should pending advice letters that include pre-scheduled waive trips be treated? So commission staff takes the position for all appealed, pending, and future advice letters. Any data associated with pre-scheduled trips shall be reported separately from on-demand trips. CPD also believes whichever framework or definition of pre-scheduled waive trips the Commission ultimately adopts, it shall not be applied retroactively to past approved advice letters unless the disposition was appealed. Also, consistent with performance standards the Commission has established in prior tracks for on-demand waive trips, performance standards have been applied going forward and not retroactively. Therefore, CPD staff recommends the following. So for appealed advice letters, Lyft shall file supplemental data reflecting newly adopted pre-scheduled waive requirements. And if the filing is compliant, CPD will put forth a resolution to be voted at one of the Commission's voting meeting. For approved advice letters, CPD staff recommends to maintain staff's initial disposition, as mentioned, consistent with how Commission has been applying new performance standards going forward and not retroactively. And for pending advice letters, CPD staff recommends Lyft to file supplements reflecting newly adopted pre-scheduled waive requirements. And if compliant, CPD staff will issue a certification approving the advice letter consistent with current practices. I am now on slide 12. So this last slide on slide 12 reads, how should data on the use of pre-scheduled waive trips be reported to the Commission? So in response to this question, Commission staff recommends that all TNCs report on pre-scheduled waive trips separately from on-demand trips, quarterly and by county submitted via an advice letter filing with a template provided by CPD staff, just like the ones TNCs are already using for their on-demand waive trips. As with other reporting requirements, access providers would be encouraged to similarly separate out pre-scheduled waive trip reporting. So this concludes staff's proposal. I will now hand it over to Reagan for the next agenda item. Reagan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. So moving on to the next agenda item, our presentation from parties in response to the amended track 5 scoping memo. So after the presentation from parties, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers after the presentations. The main purpose of the Q&As is meant to focus on parties or the public to seek clarifications of the proposal presented and not to voice their opinion or provide a position of the proposals. We're allotting 10 minutes for each presenter, and then for those presenting, keep an eye on your chat box, and I'll give you a 5-minute and a 2-minute warning, just so you're aware of time. Hoping that we won't really need that much time. But so let's start the presentation with Lyft, and the presenter is, forgive me if mispronouncing your first name, Janae Weaver.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
It's all yours, Janae.
Thank you. Can everyone see my screen clearly?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Janae Weaver, Regulatory Counsel on behalf of Lyft. I will also like to note that Daniel Rocky from Bryan Cave Outside Counsel is also on the call on behalf of Lyft.
All right.
During the presentation, I will be giving a background on Lyft pre-scheduled trips. I will also discuss the rider experience, as well as outline our recommendations. Since 2020, Lyft has provided pre-scheduled trips as part of its WAVE program in Los Angeles and San Francisco. We began offering pre-scheduled trips as part of our WAVE program in response to feedback from individuals in the disability community. Lyft riders may pre-schedule a trip no more than 7 days in advance of a rider's desired pickup time. In 2020, 5.1% of all WAVE rides were pre-scheduled were requested. In 2021, we had 7.1% of requested pre-scheduled rides out of the total WAVE rides provided. In 2020, out of all WAVE rides completed by WAVE, 6.4% were pre-scheduled. In 2021, we had 9.4% of all WAVE rides completed by WAVE were pre-scheduled. Now, the rider experience. When a rider decides that they would like to pre-schedule a ride, they log into the Lyft app just as if they were going to log on to request an on-demand ride. They would then select the option to plan ahead. On the screen, I have a visual of what the app would look like to the rider if they were performing the steps that I am describing. Step 2, the rider is given the option to set their desired pickup time. They will select the time as well as the date of their pickup. Step 3 refers to the action of the Lyft driver. After a rider selects the day and time of their desired pickup, the scheduled trip is sent to our driver pool, where any driver that's within the region of the desired pickup location can select to drive for that particular pre-scheduled trip. They see all pre-scheduled trips in the More Ways to Earn option on the driver Lyft app. Step 4 also belongs to the driver. The day of the trip, the driver who previously accepted a pre-scheduled trip will receive scheduled notices via text at 45, 20, and 5-minute intervals prior to the scheduled pickup time, reminding them to log into the app in order to perform the scheduled trip. Step 5 is the day of the trip. The Lyft app will dispatch the pre-scheduled trip to the driver that accepted the trip. I do want to note that a pre-scheduled ride will be assigned to another driver if the driver who accepted the pre-scheduled trip is not in the area of the pickup, the driver is performing a ride that will prevent them from performing the accepted scheduled ride, or the driver is not logged into the app. For step 6, the WAVE rider will be able to log into the app the day of their desired pickup, and at the desired pickup time, they will be able to view their ride in the same manner that they would be able to review a real-time dispatch. This next slide provides a bit of a timeline that again presents the example that I just went through with more specific details. So, for example, you have a WAVE rider that would like to pre-schedule a trip for a doctor's appointment. They decide on Monday, February 14th that they need a ride on Friday, February 18th. They log into the Lyft app at 10:05 a.m. on Monday, February 14th. They go into the app, they tap on the plan ahead option, and they schedule their trip for Friday at 11:30 a.m. Shortly after that trip is scheduled, that trip is sent to our driver pool. Drivers then, through the More Ways to Earn option, have the opportunity to accept the pre-scheduled trip. On the day of the trip, beginning at 10:45 a.m., notifications are sent to the driver reminding them to log on to the app. At 11:15 a.m., Friday, February 18th, the driver gets a notification to begin driving to the rider's location. Again, the system will automatically send the trip to another driver if the driver that had accepted the pre-scheduled trip is not in the area of the trip, is performing a trip that will not allow them to perform the scheduled trip, or if they have not logged on to the app. And then finally, at 11:32 a.m., a driver arrives at the desired pickup location. In this example, the response time would be 2 minutes, because at 11:30 a.m. was when the ride was originally requested, and at 11:32 a.m. is when the vehicle arrived. Now an outline of our recommendations. Waive pre-scheduled trips should be included in the Access for All program. The on-demand definition provided by the CPUC says that service that does not follow a fixed route and/or schedule should be considered on demand. A waived pre-scheduled ride does not follow a fixed route. It does not follow a set time schedule. In fact, any rider seeking a waived service may request any desired pickup time up to 7 days in advance. Waived pre-scheduled trips should be evaluated similarly to on-demand trips. The definition of response time should be clarified for pre-scheduled trips. It should be calculated as the time elapsed between when a waived ride was requested to arrive and when the vehicle arrived, with requested to arrive defined as the time for which the pickup was scheduled by the rider. We recommend that the same benchmarks should be used for both real-time dispatch and pre-scheduled rides, because the purpose is to measure the rider experience and the service provided to the rider. Approved advice letters should not be re-adjudicated, as there are no grounds under decision 20-0307, excuse me, and suspended advice letters should be evaluated under current applicable rules. Data for pre-scheduled trips and on-demand trips should be submitted in the same data set. Thank you.
Thank you, Janae. Our next presenter is Disability Rights California, and the speaker is Autumn Elliott. Autumn?
Good morning, thank you. And the gardeners in my neighborhood have just started using blowers, so right on time. So I'm Autumn Elliott. I'm from Disability Rights California, and I'm making a presentation on behalf of the Disability Advocates, which is a group of Disability Rights California, DREDF, the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, and Center for Accessible Technology. And Melissa Kasnitz is also in this workshop on behalf of Center for Accessible Technology. Our core message is that pre-scheduled trips have value, and we recognize Lyft for providing those in an acknowledgement that people with disabilities want access to the same services that anybody else has. That's really all that they're looking for. But it's a different service from on-demand service. And the language of the Transportation Network Company Access for All Act is clear, and so is the intent of the legislation, that the core is to give people with disabilities access to on-demand service. So the key goal here is to ensure that pre-scheduled service doesn't displace on-demand service. The disability advocates aren't opposed to setting up a process that allows TNCs to use use access funds for pre-scheduled service, but we need a structure that doesn't inadvertently motivate transportation network companies to replace on-demand service with pre-scheduled. It's important that reporting on these two distinct services be done separately. Otherwise, it's going to dilute the information available in a way that'll make it incomprehensible. If the data on, for example, the wait times for on-demand service and the wait times for pre-scheduled service are glommed together, we're not going to be able to tell what level of service on the ground people are actually getting. And, given the significance of access to the service to people with disabilities, it's really important that there be clear, easily understandable public data. In addition to the reporting of completion rates and wait times being separate, there need to be different standards for on-demand rides and pre-scheduled rides, because it's a lot easier to have zero wait time or a very short wait time and much better completion rates for pre-scheduled service. So the standards for pre-scheduled service need to be a lot more rigorous than for on-demand, because you can, with pre-scheduled, you can send somebody to a particular place at a particular time way in advance, whereas with on-demand service, it's much more dependent on who happens to be in the area at a given time. As far as what those standards are, the commission needs more information in order to do that. There's no reason that TNCs shouldn't be able to, for pre-scheduled wave rides, there's no reason that TNCs shouldn't be able to match the wait times and the completion rates that people without disabilities experience. And so in order to set the appropriate standards, there needs to be reporting both, for Lyft and anyone else who's providing pre-scheduled service for wheelchair accessible rides, not just what are the completion rates and wait times for that, but for all the TNCs, there needs to be reporting on what all the TNCs that provide pre-scheduled service to the general public, what are the wait times and what are the completion rates that the general public experience, and that should be the guide for what the standards are for wave pre-scheduled rides. The key here is to, in allowing TNCs to use offset funds to fund wheelchair accessible pre-scheduled rides, is to avoid overly weighting them, because what's really critical is not displacing the on-demand rides. Our suggestion there is the TNC should report the percentages of pre-scheduled versus on-demand rides for both wheelchair accessible vehicle service and for standard rides. And if it becomes evident that pre-scheduled rides are starting to predominate relative to the percentage that exists for non-wheelchair accessible rides, then we can all come back and give proposals to the commission for how to address that issue. We've reviewed the CPED report, and our general reaction is that it represents a pretty clear understanding of the issues that are happening and how they impact people with disabilities. We do want to reiterate that it isn't acceptable for TNCs who offer pre-scheduled services to the general public to fail to offer them to people with disabilities, people who need wheelchair accessible vehicles. So providing pre-scheduled rides to the general population, but not to people who need wheelchair accessible vehicles, should be grounds for denying an exemption request, because part of the standard for receiving an exemption from the obligation to collect funds is that the service needs to be accessible. And if there are entire areas of service that simply aren't provided to people with disabilities, that isn't an accessible service. With respect to pending advice letters, we agree those should be resubmitted with the data separated out. For the past advice letters, if the on-demand rides do meet the standards and the pre-scheduled rides represent a small percentage, and it looked like from Lyft numbers, it was around 6%, which would be a pretty small percentage, then we don't have any objection to an award of offsets. But future offset funds should only be awarded for pre-scheduled wave service if it meets separate standards that are set by the commission. And I'll close by just restating our core message, which is that there needs to be separate reporting, separate standards, and a structure that ensures that pre-scheduled trips don't displace the provision of the on-demand wave service that is at the core of the TNC Access for All Act. Thank you.
This is Melissa Kasnitz. Can I just jump in to provide, I think, perhaps a tiny bit of clarification on one of Autumn's final points?
Sure.
Yes, Melissa, you have 2 minutes.
Great. For the request that data be resubmitted for the pending advice letters, but that no new standard be put in place for the past letters, we want to be clear that that would include a recalculation of response rates and times that exclusively looks at the performance of the on-demand service. There wouldn't be a separate standard for the pre-scheduled service, but our concern, as Autumn expressed, is that arrival times for pre-scheduled service are likely to be much more prompt. And so those should be excluded from the calculation, and the calculation should be reperformed just looking at on-demand service. And then an evaluation should be made as to whether that newly calculated set of numbers meets the offset standard. So we're not proposing to change the standard, but we are proposing to exclude pre-scheduled rides from the calculation in the resubmitted advice letters. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa and Autumn. Our next presenter is San Francisco, which consists of SFMTA and SFMTA, and the speakers are Joe Castiglione, Erin McAuliffe, and Annette Williams. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Reagan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thanks. This is Erin McAuliffe. I'm Principal Planner with the Accessible Services Group at SFMTA. I'll speak on the comments submitted by the City and County of San Francisco, which is SFMTA, San Francisco County Transportation Authority, as well as San Francisco Mayor's Office on Disability. Thank you, Janae and Autumn and Melissa, for going through your comments. Just really wanted to emphasize Autumn's comments on sort of the North Star for this entire track, which is, people with disabilities are looking for the same service as everyone else, and TNC Access for All Act is really here to facilitate that. So that's what we keep in mind as we submit our comments or this entire proceeding. To go over the specific questions in the scoping memo, starting with what is a pre-scheduled ride and why are they important to riders? I think both Janae and Autumn did a great job explaining that a pre-scheduled wave trip is basically any trip where the customer is choosing the pickup time. And for San Francisco, that's regardless of how far in the future. We understand, again, from the customer experience that on an Uber or Lyft app, you can request it as little as 5 minutes in advance from your time. So that's something to get a little bit more clarity on from both the TNCs. These trips are a really important option for TNC services to offer because they do provide confidence to the customer that they'll be picked up on time for time-sensitive events such as rides to the airport or an essential medical procedure, things that are scheduled, and you want some more reassurance that you're not going to be sitting there requesting your ride and not sure if someone's going to accept it and when they're going to show up. And most importantly, because TNCs offer this service to the general public, as a matter of non-discrimination, Wave customers should be able to request a pre-scheduled trip the same way as any non-Wave rider. On the question of whether pre-scheduled rides should be included in the consideration for offsets and exemptions, as has been mentioned, the current offset and exemption performance standards do not contemplate pre-scheduled service. So therefore, those standards are based on completion standards and response times for trips requested for immediate dispatch. It's basically apples to oranges, and it wouldn't be appropriate to include them in the current requests. I think, as Adam did a really great job explaining. However, we do believe it's reasonable to reimburse TNCs for the incremental costs of these trips if they are improving access to TNCs for wheelchair users. But first, of course, the Commission needs to establish appropriate performance standards for the services. What should the framework be for that? Again, on-demand and pre-scheduled Wave service are different, so they do need to be reported separately, and we should use appropriate metrics. The two things that we do call out in our comments are we should be establishing appropriate trip completion standards. As been discussed, drivers receive these requests in advance and have time to plan, so those completion rate expectations are much higher than, or even higher than on-demand trips. And San Francisco does propose a new period C, which is the time between the scheduled arrival time and the actual arrival time, with a minimum of 0. The performance framework for these rides for pre-scheduled rides should be based on pre-scheduled service for the general public, similar to the methodology used for on-demand trips or immediate dispatch trips. They should be reflective of county level variation and basically getting us to that equivalent standard for the general public. We did decline to make a specific proposal for these appropriate metrics for offsets and exemptions because the record does not include any data that would be required to establish these standards. But we do hope that the workshop today and the rest of this track will shed more light on that. Some other important considerations for advice letters. We fully agree with the disability advocates on what they've proposed. Really starting with revising the ones currently submitted and pending, correcting previous, and making sure that the pre-scheduled trips don't somehow skew the data for this current standards. Moving forward, we need to clearly distinguish between pre-scheduled and on-demand trips in data reporting generally, both for Wave and non-Wave service. In our comments, we did propose specific fields the Commission should incorporate into the reporting. And just to wrap up with, we understand that and appreciate that pre-scheduled Wave service is really important. And the uncertainty for the TNCs of whether or not they'll get reimbursed for that, we do understand that. And so while we think that TNC should be providing equal access to their services regardless of whether funding is available. We do understand that what's the reality of the situation and urge the commission to establish these standards expediently so that we don't further disincentivize or discourage TNCs from providing this essential service. And I don't think Joe is here, but we do have Annette in case she wants to add anything in our last few minutes of our presentation.
You covered it, Erin.
Thanks, Annette.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Thank you everyone for keeping your presentation within the allotted time. San Francisco Taxi Workers Alliance is not able to present today, and so I'll hand it over to Tara for the Q&A portion of our workshop.
Thank you, Reagan. Let me just double check to see if anyone from SFTWA is on the call and still would like to give a presentation. Okay. All right, so let's move into the session. This is a Q&A session, and the purpose of this segment is to gain clarity on party proposals and presentations by asking one another questions. We will have an open discussion session after the break, so please reserve substantive discussion and dialogue about sort of additive proposals or adjusted proposals to that session. We will be using the raise hand feature to field questions and comments. I'll give you a little demo of what that looks like in a second. And we'll offer verbal questions first for anyone who can't use the raise hand feature. And if you can't use that tool, the raise hand tool or the chat box, and can't speak your question, you can also email us at tncaccess@cpuc.ca.gov. We'll be monitoring that, and one of us can verbalize your question for the group. The raise hand icon is located by clicking, sorry, this is actually outdated. Let me go to the next slide just to demonstrate here. The raise hand icon should be in the lower panel of your WebEx window. It's right next to the smiley face icon. And when you click on that, it turns yellow, and that will raise your hand and alert us to the fact that you would like to speak. So we'll be monitoring those and calling on those with their hands raised. Can you go back to that previous slide, please, Anna? When called upon, please identify yourself and the organization that you're affiliated with. And please lower your hand after speaking by just clicking on the same icon a second time. Let me first offer any clarification questions on those instructions, particularly for those who cannot use the raise hand feature. Please verbalize your question.
Hi, this is Autumn. Maybe I have an outdated version of WebEx, but next to the little smiley face, I actually don't see a little raise hand.
Okay, if you click on that smiley face icon, does a menu pop up where the raise hand is embedded? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, WebEx launched a big update in the last few days, so we're trying to keep pace, and sounds like it's a little bit disjointed, but thank you for that question. Any other questions on instructions? Okay. We will just leave this slide up so you can see. So let me open the floor. Again, please use the raise hand feature if you have a question. For one another, seeking clarity on proposals that were presented today or proposals that were provided as written comments and not presented today. And while we wait for those questions to come in, I think we may have some of our own, so I'll start there. I have a question for Janae and Lyft. You mentioned in your presentation, I think there were 3 specific scenarios in which a driver who had previously accepted a pre-scheduled trip request would have that trip reassigned. For example, the situation in which that particular driver was in the process of delivering a separate trip at a time that would conflict with the requested pickup time for the pre-scheduled trip. Does Lyft have any measures to mitigate the risk of a Wave driver being on a conflicting trip at the time they had accepted a pre-scheduled trip?
Thank you for your question, Tara. That is a question that I would have to go back to our system engineers to be able to provide you an accurate response. But I do want to note that when a pre-scheduled trip is scheduled, it gets sent to our driver's pool. And so basically that trip is put on reserve by a driver. The driver, the day of the desired pickup time, can perform other Lyft trips, including on demand. And that's where those 3 scenarios come into play, as well as a driver could have an emergency or just decide that they're not going to drive that particular day, which would also invoke a scenario where we will dispatch the trip to a nearest driver that's closest to the desired pickup location.
Okay, great. Okay. I see 2 hands now. Reagan, I think you might be building on my question. Let me go to Reagan first and then Autumn.
Yes, it is related to your question, Tara. So what happens when a driver cancels right on time, close to like, let's say 10:30 pickup time and cancel at 10:30? Would that still be reassigned to a pre-scheduled driver, or will that request be, I would say, converted to an on-demand trip? I mean, what was the process if that's the scenario, if the driver cancels just right on time?
So if the driver cancels right on time, then the trip is dispatched to the nearest driver that is available, and that original requested time remains. And so it's not converted to an on-demand trip. It's still a pre-scheduled trip. And then the response time would be the actual time that a driver showed up in comparison to the scheduled time. So if the scheduled time is 10:30 and we can't get a driver to that pickup location until 11 o'clock, then that response time is 30 minutes.
Great. Okay, let me go to Autumn and then Annette Williams.
Thank you. I also had a follow-up question. In addition to Tara's suggestion, it also occurred to me that there were other things that Lyft could do to maximize the completion rate of wheelchair accessible pre-scheduled trips. So for example, like if the driver has to affirmatively go into the app to say, more ways to earn money, then, maybe for like wheelchair accessible trips where you've got a pool of fewer drivers, maybe there could be like a push notification saying like, hey, there's a pre-scheduled trip request in your neighborhood. Do you like, are you interested or do you want to accept it or something? And like to sort of like flag for the wheelchair accessible drivers that there's pre-scheduled trips waiting. Similarly, like it would seem like Lyft could prevent a driver who has a commitment to do a pre-scheduled trip from accepting trips that would prevent them from fulfilling their obligation, right? Like if it's 5 minutes till their pre-scheduled trip and somebody's requesting like, I want to go like 20 minutes away, it seems like Lyft could like not sort of show those, like offer those to a driver that's on board to do a pre-scheduled trip. So Janae, my question for you is, does Lyft have any, are there any pieces that are in development on that process that would maximize the completion rates? And if not, is there a reason that Lyft hasn't been trying to maximize the completion rates on wheelchair accessible vehicle rides?
Thank you for your question, Autumn. Again, that's something that I will have to provide more detail in our reply comments because it's a little bit outside of the information that I have in regards to the program. I do want to note that we do aim to have the best on-time performance for all of our wave trips. And so that's why we have a system schematic in place, for lack of a better term, that dispatches a driver closest to a location. So you have to imagine that when a pre-scheduled trip comes in, we don't know the day of the trip where all of our drivers are. So it's really hard to promote for specific drivers to take a pre-scheduled trip because we don't know if they'll actually be in the area of the trip, let alone available for the trip. Dan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you've touched on some of the issues. I think one of the challenges here in the questions that you raise, Autumn, are that there are pre-scheduled rides and there are also the real-time dispatch rides. And the question is how best to balance that, right? I think in your comments, you had suggested that, well, it should be easy to obtain a lower response rate on pre-scheduled rides because Lyft can just dispatch the rider early and make sure that, the driver's waiting there. But the TNC can't really do that because then if the driver is occupied on a pre-scheduled, he or she is unavailable to provide a ride for a real-time dispatch. And so, there's a real balance there. I think, Lyft is constantly trying to evaluate that and strike the right balance. But there are a number of factors that can come into it. I think we also need to consider that pre-scheduled rides are any of the same factors that impact real-time dispatch. So there could be unanticipated traffic or construction, or there could be a surge of demand right about the time of a pre-scheduled ride. And so there still are a number of different factors. Obviously, Lyft tries to take those into account in dispatching a pre-scheduled ride. But again, it can't just commit all the drivers to pre-scheduled rides because then people, asking for a real-time dispatch might not be able to get one. And, as many people have pointed out, obviously the thrust of the act is to make sure that real-time dispatch rides are available to individuals in the disability community. So, your questions are good ones. But it's not that simple, right? There are a number of different factors that go into it.
Okay, thank you for your questions and responses. I see Annette Williams' hand and then Helen Smolinski. Annette?
I just wanted to follow up on the earlier comment. In terms of a driver, this is just for my clarification. If a driver, for instance, decides, the day of, or, they've taken a pre-scheduled ride and they decide the day of that they're going to not be able to work that day, wouldn't you just put that ride out again for another pre-scheduled driver to take it and not wait until 15 minutes before to dispatch it, since you have significant amount of time?
Thank you for your question, Annette. It is my understanding that we do not do that, that we do wait until closer to the desired pickup time to dispatch the ride to the nearest driver. However, I will go back to our systems engineer and confirm that that information is correct, and we'll provide a response in our reply comments.
So just to clarify, just so I'm clear, so, but for the original trip, when it was, requested in a pre-scheduled way, you did put them out to the drivers. So a driver could choose it at that time.
Correct.
But once that's happened, that it only happens once and you wouldn't do it again if that driver decides to bow out for some reason, even if it's a long time ahead of the trip. That's just for my clarification. Okay.
That's my understanding, but I do want to clarify with our system engineers.
Thank you.
Okay. Helen Smolinski. Helen, are you, let's see.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
Amateur
Did you
here.
have a
I'm
question?
sorry about that. Yeah, good morning. Two follow-ups. Lyft, it's my understanding as a mother of a child in a wheelchair who utilizes or had utilized the pre-scheduled option multiple times with Lyft, that your drivers are zoned, meaning I regularly got the same driver for pickup at my home, and regularly got the same driver, a different driver, a few miles away at my daughter's doctor's office. Again, my understanding was you Lyft assigns drivers to zones within the city to have that wheelchair accessible vehicle available. Is that not the case? Like, so my point is, you had said, well, we don't know where our drivers are. My understanding from the drivers themselves is that you do, that they only work in certain zones in the city.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you for your.
Just a quick reminder for everyone who's not speaking, please put yourself on mute. Go ahead, Janae.
Thank you, Helen, for your question. It is my understanding that Lyft drivers operate in a region, so they might have a certain mile radius around their home that they choose to provide trips. And so in that case, if you are in their region, then yes, you would likely see the same driver if you have repeated trips. However, I'm not aware that we do set those regions for drivers, but that again is something that I can clarify and provide an explanation for.
Okay. Yeah, please do, because again, these drivers are telling me they're not living in my neighborhood, they're not in my region. They say that this is their zone for wave pickups. That's why I would think you'd know where they are, so you can account for the pre-scheduled rides. And finally, one last point. I understand that the thrust of the TNC Act may be on-demand access to wheelchair accessible vehicles, but in my personal experience, the preference for wheelchair riders is to be able to pre-schedule it. So I would hope that that's more the priority. Again, folks in wheelchairs, if there is that anxiety about, will the Lyft, will the Uber, will the accessible taxi show up when I need it to? And so to alleviate some of that anxiety, or all of that anxiety, we prefer to schedule it in advance. Like, for instance, a person who's not in a wheelchair who needs to make sure they get to the airport on time. It's even more so the case with a person in a wheelchair who doesn't have another option necessarily for that ride. They can't just grab a ride or borrow somebody's car or get a ride with a neighbor or a friend. They need that reliability for many, if not all, their trips, frankly. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I suspect some may want to respond to your comment. We will save that for the discussion period that will follow the break. As a reminder, I want to maintain this session for clarification questions on the proposals. For Autumn and Annette, if you could lower your hand as long as you don't still have an additional question, so I know not to call on you. Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised right now, so I will ask one other question. And this one is for Autumn and the disability advocates. One of the ideas that you mentioned is that the disability advocates would like to ensure, would like to measure, sort of monitor if and when the pre-scheduled ride type starts to predominate over on-demand ride types for the wave service. And if that is observed, that the commission should sort of reopen a question over how to respond in that scenario. My question for you is, I think you articulate pretty well what you would consider or how you would measure a displacement. But what does it mean to predominate? What would we actually be tracking to understand whether one or the other is predominating relative to the other? Let's see.
Sure, thank you. And I might be having network problems, so bear with me if I do. So the idea would be that because it should be a lot easier for TNCs to on pre-scheduled rides. Don't want on-demand rides and get shifted over to pre-scheduled rides. And you know, and if there was a clear way now to okay, I'll turn off my video, see if that helps. If there was a clear way to anticipate what that we could set it now, but it's something that may not end up happening, and so that was what was coming from, well, maybe let's see if it does, and then if it does, we can figure out how to deal with it and make sure that it doesn't happen, because we also don't want to disincentivize provision of accessible pre-scheduled rides. As far as like how do you know when that's happening? It's two things. It is looking at what's the percentage of pre-scheduled rides utilized by the general public versus what's the percentage of pre-scheduled rides utilized by people who need wheelchair accessible vehicles. You know, if those are kind of moving more or less in tandem, then that's a pretty good indicator that it's not getting skewed. If it turns out that it's like 6% for the general public and 75% for wheelchair accessible rides, then that suggests that there is an inappropriate shift. You know, and then the other thing to look at is what do we hear from people in the public who use wheelchairs and their experience? You know, are they saying, I can't get the on-demand rides I need, and it's making me tear my hair out because I want to go out to dinner with my friends. I want to go to a meeting that I don't know when it's going to finish, and I can't. Or you know, are they saying, you know, and You get the idea. So, what's the experience on the ground? Those would be the two things to look at to know if there's a problem.
Got it. Thank you. Don't see any other hands raised at the moment. Anna or Reagan, did you have any clarification questions on proposals?
I have a couple. So I guess this question is for Janae. Since you're kind of talking about the weeds of how it works, how the pre-schedule works. I guess my question is for standard pre-scheduled service, if the driver arrived before the scheduled time, are the passengers charged for that time?
Thank you, Anna. I do not know the answer to that question, and I will have to get back to you.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that we put in the staff proposal is that they shouldn't be charged for the wave riders just because they may take a little bit longer just to get there to the destination or to the pickup spot. So, but yeah, if you can let us know. I have another question. Oh,
Anna, sorry, I just want to clarify your question. So are you asking for our standard Lyft rides where we offer pre-scheduled trips if the driver arrives prior to this pre-scheduled time, whether or not the rider gets charged for that time prior to the scheduled time?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Janae, I would add to that for the wave pre-scheduled as well. Same question.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
I think Daniel has his hands up in response to the question. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I have a question for clarification for the comments by Autumn and from San Francisco. They had made the point that they think the commission should develop separate standards, entirely separate standards for pre-scheduled rides. And the assumption was that the existing milestones that were agreed on in the last decision were based strictly on real-time dispatch rides. But I think that's a misconception because the existing milestones were developed based on the actual data. And as Janae has pointed out, that data includes pre-scheduled rides, right? It has since 2020. So Lyft and Uber had sort of exchanged thoughts on what those milestones should be. And so those existing milestones actually do incorporate pre-scheduled rides. And so if we are going to start talking about creating a whole separate standard for pre-scheduled rides, then I think we need to scrap everything and start all over again, because then you would have to back out pre-scheduled rides from the existing milestones and figure out what is the impact of that. And then you would have to create a whole new set of milestones. We don't think that's necessary for a number of reasons. One, as we pointed out, pre-scheduled are a very small percentage of the existing rides. So either way, it's not going to have that big of an impact. We also think that there's a consensus that the correct way to measure pre-scheduled response times is the difference between the scheduled arrival and the actual arrival. And, that's how Lyft has done it. Lyft endeavored to find the approach that was most closely approximated the experience of the rider, which is what the milestones were intended to accomplish, and has been applying that and incorporated that into the existing benchmarks. So we think the existing benchmarks are appropriate. And frankly, if we go down the route of creating entirely separate benchmarks, you sort of go into a rabbit hole of, what is that going to do to, the existing benchmarks and what are the new ones? And we just don't think that's necessary. And it'll create a lot of unintended consequences.
Thank you, Daniel. I see Erin McAuliffe, hand raised.
Thanks, Tara. Just wanted to, since it's a clarification on San Francisco's proposal, I wanted to respond to that. And I guess I'm not sure, Daniel, what your assumptions seem to be different than what's reflected in the record. It sounds like maybe there were separate conversations between Uber and Lyft that are not reflected in the record of the proceeding, or that you're privy to some information on the methodology used that maybe we aren't and the disability advocates aren't. So again, I just want to reiterate our request for clear data in the record that we can all then base our performance standards off of, because there seems to be disagreement on how those were created and what underlying data supports that. We are not aware of pre-scheduled trips being included or not. We didn't be looking at the data that is collected from TNCs. We don't know how they would be differentiated or how we would know that. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Erin. Daniel, if you had a quick response to that, please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously you wouldn't be privy to the exact process that we used in proposing the milestones that we did, but we did make clear in all of our comments that the milestones that we had proposed were based on the existing data from our program, from Uber's program. And so that's what I'm referring to, is that I think if you go back to our comments, you'll see that we were very clear about that in developing our proposal for milestones. We looked at the actual data and then tried to project forward. But
so are you saying, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Are you saying that you acknowledge that there was pre-scheduled service? That is another option you were offering? I guess I didn't understand that. I didn't see that in the record.
Yes, as Janae pointed out in her presentation. Were you present for that? She said Lyft has been offering it since 2020.
No, I'm talking about the part you just mentioned, that when we were making proposals on the benchmarks, which were adopted, you're saying you included data, you included reference to pre-scheduled trips. I don't remember. I think, part of this track 5A is addressing the fact that that was actually an oversight. No one, either the commission or parties, brought up the fact that there was a potential for pre-scheduled service.
I think you're misunderstanding my comment. My comment is the milestones were proposed based on the data. That data included a small percentage of pre-scheduled rides. So those
right, and that wasn't called. I'm asking, did you call that out? Was it made clear when that data was presented, your proposal was made? Because that's what I don't understand. We never understood that to be inclusive of pre-scheduled service.
Right, I understand you. My point is that the data was incorporated in the existing data, and so your proposal that we need a separate set of milestones for pre-scheduled because the existing milestones did not include pre-scheduled is erroneous.
I guess what you're not understanding from me is that maybe you understood that, but other parties did not understand. But we're not clear on what was inclusive and what you were basing it on. So we can't reasonably have all agreed on something that we don't know what's in that data set or what you're basing something on. So that's why San Francisco thinks it would be really prudent for CPUC to make really clear, what are the standards for on-demand service versus pre-scheduled service, because we don't stand in Uber or Lyft's shoes. We did not know what you're saying you all assumed and knew to be true. So this is an opportunity to clarify that.
Now that you understand that the existing
milestones. The nice thing about doing transit is you get
Please mute yourself if you're not speaking at this time.
Paper or whatever. Right, simple stuff.
Benjamin Gembler, please mute yourself.
Yeah, all is well that ends.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Okay. Well, I guess I have a clarification question for you, Erin. So now that you do understand that the milestones that we had proposed incorporated pre-scheduled rides, are you still proposing that the commission create separate milestones? Or are you in agreement with us now that because the existing milestones did incorporate pre-scheduled rides, that
I think there's a first distinction that we are not clear on, which is the reporting periods for pre-scheduled and on-demand are different. There's a different way of measuring response time. So, for example, San Francisco proposed a period C. So regardless of whether your data and your proposal included pre-scheduled rides, we do think that there is a different way of looking at that data. So no, we would not agree with your proposal. And I don't think that your proposal but the proposal Lyft made was adopted as you put it in your comments. So I don't think I think that's kind of moot.
Thank you for your comments, Erin, and we will address your questions in our reply comments.
Thank you, Janae.
Okay, thank you for that. I see several hands raised. For anyone that has already spoken, please lower your hand if you don't have additional comments. I think next was Autumn Elliott, then Reagan, Roxford, Helen Smolinski, and Annette Williams. Autumn, please.
Great, thank you. This is in response to Lyft's question for me. So you noted that Lyft is proposing that the relevant time be arrival time versus requested time for pre-scheduled trips. If the question is, do the disability advocates agree with that? The answer is yes. I don't think I saw any of the parties propose anything different. If your question for us is, given this new information that Lyft included pre-scheduled trips in its response time data, does that change any of our proposals? The answer is that it doesn't. The existing benchmarks for on-demand rides are so broad that they would render pre-scheduled trips essentially meaningless. You know, if you're trying to get to a doctor's appointment and your pre-scheduled ride shows up 30 minutes late, that's not helpful to you. You know, that there was no point in having pre-scheduled in the first place. With respect to your point about the data, our understanding is that Uber has not been providing wheelchair accessible pre-scheduled rides. So the data provided by Uber was not impacted by the existence or not of pre-scheduled rides at all. And according to Janae's presentation, the percentage of pre-scheduled rides was small. And so when you consider that the benchmarks were set at, you know, were rounded off to the nearest 5 or 10 minutes, I would think that any budging of the numbers one way or the other of only Lyft numbers based on the pre-scheduled rides, that would be subsumed into those rounding errors. You know, I can't see that it would have changed the commission's calculation of what the benchmarks would be at all. And then my final point is that it was Lyft who chose not to disclose to all of us that it was using both pre-scheduled and on-demand rides in its data when the clear focus of all of our discussion has been on demand rides. So for Lyft now to come back and say, you know, whoa, we've suddenly realized that hiding that information wasn't in our interest, let's redo the whole thing, isn't something that the commission should take as a reason to go back and redo everything that has been done before. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Autumn. Reagan is next.
Thanks, Sarah. My question is for Janae. Just having really hard time kind of wrapping my head around what makes reschedule ride on demand is, you said that Lyft dispatches prescheduled rides much closer to the scheduled pickup time, typically within 15 minutes of the scheduled time. My understanding of other prescheduled services, for example, paratransit and other type of prescheduled services, that the providers know for sure much more in advance which vehicle or driver will fulfill that specific prescheduled ride. So in this case, for Lyft, dispatching it 15 minutes closer to the pickup time kind of makes it more like an on-demand type of service rather than pre-scheduled. Do you agree with that characterization that your pre-scheduled service is kind of much more an on-demand service when it comes to dispatching the ride to a driver because you do it right very close to the pickup time?
Thank you, Reagan. Yes, I would say that our pre-scheduled trips are more similarly situated to on-demand trips than traditional paratransit trips, partly because of our business model. We have drivers providing wheelchair accessible vehicles at their will and leisure. They don't have to provide it every single day at a set time. When they are available to provide a trip, they can provide a trip. And so because of that, we dispatch our rides right before, unlike in paratransit when it is scheduled and we know the driver who will be performing that trip.
Okay, just a quick follow-up. So then passengers, I guess, again, has less assurance in terms of kind of getting, their request fulfilled than in your traditional paratransit or other rescheduled service.
The expectation of the trip is more similar to on-demand than paratransit. So just in on-demand, when a rider requests a trip, let's say it's 10:29 and the rider needs a vehicle at this moment, then they will be given an estimated time of arrival. Let's say it's 10:34. And so the rider is expecting the driver to show up at 10:34. If we do not have a driver that is in the area and that can be there at 10:34 and maybe it gets there at 10:36, then that's that response time that captures that rider's experience that the ride arrived 2 minutes late. And so the same principle applies for pre-scheduled trips. The rider is expecting that the vehicles show up at Friday at 11:30 a.m. If we get the vehicle there at 11:32, that 2-minute response time captures that rider's experience of the ride arriving 2 minutes late.
Okay, but then you don't really make an assurance once the passenger scheduled ride that it will be fulfilled. I mean, again, there's that. What I'm saying is the passenger don't get the assurance that it will be fulfilled, versus if you made the ride or request through other rescheduled service where you know for sure 100% that on that day and time the driver and vehicle will arrive. But in your model, it's still not sure that they will pick up the passenger, right?
So if I understand your question is, does a rider receive assurance that when they schedule a ride for 11:30 a.m. on Friday, that a vehicle will show up at 11:30 a.m.? As far as specific communication that comes through the app, I'm unaware of that. That says your ride is locked in and we will have a vehicle there at that time. I do not know if the rider receives such communication, but I do know on the back end, the system is working to ensure that a vehicle is there at the requested time, hence why that pre-scheduled ride is dispatched, or rather it's sent to that driver pool so that drivers can select to perform that scheduled ride. And it's the expectation that that rider will receive that ride. And then on the off chance that that driver is unable to perform the ride, that's when we dispatch the nearest driver.
Okay. Thanks, Janae.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Next on my list is Helen Smolinski. Helen, did you have another question?
Yes, I do. Sorry about that. So two things. Lyft, Janae, it sounds like Lyft is under the impression that you're still offering pre-scheduled rides. My family has not been able to order a pre-scheduled access ride since late 2021.
And are you in Los Angeles or San Francisco? You don't have to indicate where you are, but are you in one of those two locations?
I'm in San Francisco. Was this already asked and answered?
I'm unaware of any issues with scheduling rides in San Francisco, but I will definitely check on that for you.
Pre-scheduled rides. I used to be able to order pre-scheduled access rides, aka the wheelchair accessible vehicles from Lyft. You were our preferred provider all of 2021. Again, our drivers were contracted out with a private company with the wheelchair accessible vans. We had these drivers worked in zones in San Francisco. When I exclaimed to our regular driver that I couldn't order one day, he said, or there was longer wait time. He from another area, he said that driver was out sick that day, so that accounted for the longer wait time. But in any case, yes, I have not been able to order a pre-scheduled wheelchair accessible vehicle from Uber or Lyft since all of 2022.
I would encourage you to go back through the app.
I've been doing it. I've been doing it while we've been in this meeting, and the calendar icon in the app is boldface, allowing me to plan ahead depending on the ride I choose. I can do that for a regular Lyft. I can schedule that ahead. But as my family's experience has been all of 2022, when we hit access, the calendar icon that says plan ahead fades. It's no longer bold. So I can't hit that plan ahead option. I thought it was a glitch. I thought something had changed with the app when we first experienced this in early January 2022. I've been in communication with Lyft help. And they at first told me to refresh my phone, turn off my phone, all that kind of stuff. That wasn't the point. It was happening on my wife's phone as well, on her app. I've talked with other riders. I've asked the drivers what's going on. Because frankly, right?
Helen?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but if you would send me a direct chat, so not to everyone, but a direct chat, your email, I will have a Lyft staff person reach out to you so that we can address this issue, because to my knowledge, we do have pre-scheduled trips in San Francisco, and you should be able to schedule a trip on your app. So if you just send me directly in the chat your email, I will have someone get back to you.
Okay, Janae, thank you for that. I will do that. For what it's worth, though, I don't think it's coincidental. I'm not able to do it on Uber anymore either. So I don't know what changed or why, but in San Francisco, my family is not able to order pre-scheduled rides, access or wave rides on Uber or Lyft. I will follow up with you directly, Janae. I hope it's as simple as an app glitch, but again, it's happening on my iPhone, and my wife, who has an Android, isn't able to order them pre-scheduled either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen and Janae. Next on my list is Annette Williams.
I just wanted to follow up on the question of different standards. And I think it's really clear from all the discussion today that performing a pre-scheduled trip is different than performing an on-demand trip because you have notice ahead of time. So it's much more likely that you can be on time for that trip. So that is one of the main reasons that there needs to be different standards that acknowledge that. And I just wanted to follow up on Helen's point was that, you know, part of the reason, at least that we get feedback from wheelchair users that they pre-schedule trips is because on demand they can't rely on, and that pre-scheduling gives more confidence that the vehicle's going to arrive. So that's why we're very concerned that, you know, if we had really good on-demand service, there probably wouldn't be the need to do as much pre-scheduling or to have that be a, you know, a significant part. And so that's part of the reason why it's so important that on-demand service meet benchmarks and clearly be available so that people don't have to decide things ahead of time, because it's very difficult if you want to do something last minute and you had to have decided yesterday to do it. But unfortunately, people do that because that's the only way they can get reliable service. Thank you.
Thank you for that addition, Annette. Let me see. Daniel, you still have your hand raised. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
No, I don't. I just forgot to put my hand down.
Okay. Thank you. We have a little over 5 minutes left for additional questions and clarification on proposals. I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
I have one more.
Okay, go ahead, Anna.
Okay. So this question is for SF and disability. I believe Melissa and Aaron kind of touched on this question a little bit, but I just wanted confirmation. So SF and disability is proposing that pending advice letters to convert the negative to zeros for pre-scheduled trips. But also SF, they proposed that pre-scheduled should not be eligible for access funds unless a framework is established. And you're proposing that we should collect non-wave pre-scheduled trips for comparison to develop that framework. So if SF is proposing to allow these pre-scheduled wave service included in the pending advice letters, at least for the, I mean, I guess my question is, are you saying that you're going to allow these pre-scheduled wave service to be included in these pending advice letters for these past quarters? Or are you saying to remove the pre-scheduled trips completely and just focus the analysis just on the on-demand until we come up with a framework?
This is Melissa for the Disability Advocates. Did you want to hear from us as well, or just SF?
Oh, both.
So for the Disability Advocates, what we're suggesting for the already submitted advice letters is that the data be separated out and a new calculation be performed looking only at the on-demand trips, because no separate standard has been set at this point for the pre-scheduled trips, and because it's our understanding that the number of those trips is relatively small, our recommendation is that if a review of the on-demand trips only meets the existing standards, that the full allocation of offset money be allocated. And that's for the already submitted advice letters. Going forward, we'd like to see a new set of standards developed. And once that's in place, the percentage split that's been put forward by CPED sounds sensible. So if 90% of the trips are on demand and the on-demand standards are satisfied, then 90% of the funding would be allocated. And then the 10% that's pre-scheduled would be evaluated under the separate pre-scheduled standard. But for the already submitted ones, if the on-demand trips meet the on-demand standard, all the funding would be allocated going, but we do want the separate data. And the other thing that Autumn touched on is this is for offsets. If pre-scheduled wave trips are not available, while pre-scheduled trips for non-wave users are available, we believe that the TNCs should not be eligible for full exemptions because we believe that that's an indicator that they are not providing comparable service to wave users, and therefore they shouldn't be eligible for full exemptions. Autumn, any clarification? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. So in other words, like there's no obligation to provide pre-scheduled trips at all, but if you're going to provide them to the general public, then they need to be provided to wheelchair users also. The only other clarification I had of Melissa's comments was, so for the the pending already submitted advice letters. So separating out the data, only looking at the data for on-demand trips to see if they meet the on-demand standards. But then if they do, just to clarify, when we say full offset can be awarded, what we mean is if the TNC's expended funds making pre-scheduled trips accessible, then it those would be allowable expenses to be offset.
Okay. And Anna, I think you had also posed that question to San Francisco for clarification as well. Annette or Aaron, would you like to respond to that?
Just that we concur with disability advocates. I think it's completely reasonable.
Thanks. Okay, we have 1 minute left. I do see a hand from Reagan, and then after this, we will go to a 10-minute break. Reagan, can you ask your question?
Yeah, it's a very quick question. I just follow up with regards to Anna's question and what Melissa's confirmed about the advice letters. So just to clarify, so you're in agreement for staff to review and issue disposition for the advice letters that have pre-scheduled rides as is, or do you want first Lyft to disaggregate that before we continue with the review of those advice letters?
This is Melissa. We want the data to be disaggregated and resubmitted, and then the evaluation revisited looking only at the data for that portion of rides that are on demand service. So for the moment, simply set aside, because we don't have standards developed, the pre-scheduled trips and look at compliance with the on-demand standards by the on-demand rides.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, everybody. We will now take a 10-minute break, reconvening here at 10:55 to go into a series of sessions focused on each of the Track 5A scoping memo issues. So we'll see you back at 10:55. Great, thank you, Anna. So we've restarted the meeting recording, and I will turn it to Anna to facilitate the next series of discussion sessions. And Anna, you are on mute.
Sorry, everyone. Okay, so we are now moving on to the open discussion portion of the agenda. So we've included questions from the scoping memo to help facilitate today's discussion. We will read the questions in case people on the phone don't have access to the presentation in front of them. So the purpose of this session is to enable robust dialogue with and among parties regarding Track 5A issues that were raised in the scoping memo. Again, we'll be utilizing the raise hand feature to field questions and comments. However, if you are unable to raise the hand feature, you may also type the questions, comments in the chat box, and we'll read it out loud, and or email us at tncaccess@cpuc.ca.gov. So we will monitor the raise hand feature and will unmute the individual selected. When called upon, again, please identify the organization you are affiliated with, and be sure to lower your hand after you speak. And again, that's where the maybe different, maybe hidden within the dot. So okay. So now I'm on slide 22. The first question is on pre-scheduled wave trip definition and reads, how should the commission define a pre-scheduled wave trip as compared to an on-demand wave trip? Are there any additional comments or questions? I'll just give it maybe a minute just to make sure. Tara, do you have access to the TNC inbox to see? Unfortunately, mine haven't been updated, so I can't read it.
Yeah, I will check. I will check there, and I see that Autumn has just raised her hand as well.
Oops. Go ahead, Autumn.
Sure. Just a super quick comment. That we wanted to make sure that any revisions to the pre-scheduled versus on-demand wave trips weren't overly restrictive for with respect to recipients of access funds. You know, sort of if in counties where the funds requested don't go to the TNCs, there's a remainder and they go to fund accessible service, that we want to ensure that there's enough flexibility there so that whatever service, whatever accessible service does make sense in that area is able to be provided. We didn't see any issues necessarily with any of the proposed definitions, but just wanted to make sure the commission was keeping that factor in mind.
Thank you, Autumn. I will lower your hand for you. Okay.
Autumn, just a clarification question on that. I just want to make sure I understood your point correctly. Are you essentially saying for the local access fund administrator side of the program, we want to make sure that they have the flexibility to define an appropriate on-demand pre-scheduled balance depending on the needs of their county? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. They just wanted to sort of like raise a little bit of a flag that we want to make sure that anything that happens with this proceeding doesn't restrict the ability of the access fund administrators to be responsive to the needs of the particular communities in awarding those funds.
Got it.
You know, like there may be, for example, like very rural counties where more of an emphasis on pre-scheduled might make sense.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
I don't see any others. So I will go ahead and move on to the next question.
And Anna, just to confirm, I didn't see any questions coming in the email inbox either.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, should the adopted response time definition be applied to pre-scheduled wave trips? If yes, how should the definitions of periods A and B be applied? If no, how should response time be defined for pre-scheduled wave trips? For example, should period A be defined as a time between when the TNC dispatches a trip request to its driver pool and when a driver ultimately accepts, denies that request? Should period B be defined as a time between when a driver accepts a trip request and when the driver arrives at the passenger's pickup location? So I will now see if anybody wants to make any comments or additional comments for this question. I don't see any. Does the team have any questions?
Let me check just a second, Anna. Okay. No, I don't have any other questions.
Okay. So let's move on to the next set of questions. So this question is on pre-scheduled wave trips eligibility. The question reads, should pre-scheduled wave trips be included in the Access for All program for purposes of qualification for offsets, exemptions, access providers, and other requirements? Okay. I see no questions or additional comments.
Anna, I'll ask a question here. And I saw Reagan raise his hand, but he took it down. I wanted to just pose a sort of general question, including for anyone that gave a presentation, but also outside of that. If there's any clarification that you wanted to provide on the the framework with regard to exemptions versus offsets. It seems to me that a lot of the discussion has focused has either abstracted from the difference between offset and exemption criteria, or focused more on the offset side. Is there anything that parties want to, or others want to raise with regard to how the exemptions work in the context of pre-scheduled? Okay, well, consider it an invitation. Oh, there's Autumn. Go ahead, Autumn.
Sure, I just wanted to reiterate our position that a TNC that is providing services to the general public that aren't offered to people who need wheelchair accessible vehicles isn't accessible and should not, under the statute, be qualified for an exemption. And so the ability to pre-schedule trips is one of those services that should be offered to the general public.
Got it. Thank you.
Reagan, you have your hand up.
Yes, it's I guess a question for Liv on this specific topic, but in your comments, you mentioned that offering pre-scheduled trips in the WAVE program, your WAVE program, it was quote in response to feedback from individuals in the disability community who had requested the option to pre-schedule WAVE rides. In terms of, I guess, the marketing and outreach efforts to promote Lyft's WAVE program, could you give a sense of how you're promoting on-demand service versus the pre-scheduled service, or are you equally promoting them to the disability community, or you're kind of, promoting one type of the service more than the other?
Thank you, Reagan. To my knowledge, we promote the WAVE program as a whole. And then, of course, under our WAVE program, we have our on-demand option, and then we have our pre-scheduled option. But in general, all of our marketing materials, it's for WAVE as a whole.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
I have other questions, but they're for the separate questions, the other ones. So
Okay.
I'll hold on.
Okay, so then I'll move on to the next question. So the next question is on the pre-scheduled performance and benchmarks. The question reads, if pre-scheduled WAVE trips are included in the Access for All program, should such trips be subject to different performance requirements than on-demand WAVE trips? If so, what performance framework or requirements should be applied? So, I mean, we've heard that we need to collect data to do a comparison, to set the framework. Just curious if there's anybody else that has additional comments that they would like to make. Okay, I don't see any comments. No hand raises. Okay.
Oh.
Reagan, you want to go?
Yeah, I guess just I mean there were there weren't really specifics on how that would help, I guess, commission to kind of figure out what the details of this new framework will be. But one of the, I guess, idea or options is, I just want to get like feedback on that, is kind of in terms of access to the Access Fund for pre-scheduled trips. One idea is to have a framework that kind of allocates the fund monies proportionately between pre-scheduled and on-demand trips. Kind of, for example, limiting the number of trips that can be pre-scheduled versus, so that you can make the on-demand model a more dominant model, but also at the same time supporting financially the pre-scheduled model. Is that something that, viable, or is there, the understanding that the Access Fund money should only be used for an actual on-demand service, such what we have right now?
So just something to think about if you want to include it in your comments. And also, I guess added to that is, in coming up with a framework, would it also be county specific? And then would we need to put like a floor of, I think what Reagan was trying to touch on is, would we need to put a floor of how many on-demand trips are required, or percentage of trips that are being offered for on-demand versus pre-scheduled? Should that be included in the framework? So just some thought, food for thought there, as we, as we're possibly collecting the non-wave pre-scheduled data. Let's see. Okay. Anything else, Reagan? I think that's it.
Not in this question.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next question.
And one quick thing, Anna, Erin McAuliffe, I see your question in the chat. We'll try to put those questions in writing back into the chat here in a few minutes.
Thank you. That'd be appreciated.
Autumn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, in response to the questions, the disability advocates' current thinking is that it may make sense to let's see what those percentages end up being, and if it seems like it's getting skewed, come back and figure out what appropriate limits would be. But we look forward to hearing what good ideas any of the parties or anybody else participating in this proceeding has, to see if there's a way to figure it out in advance. And we'll keep thinking about it as well.
Great. Thanks, Autumn. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next question on the pre-scheduled advice letter treatment. So the question is, how should previously approved advice letters that included pre-scheduled waived trips be treated? How should pending advice letters that include pre-scheduled waived trips be treated? I know we've touched a lot on this question, but anybody want to make additional comments that wasn't addressed? I don't see anything. Okay, so moving on to the next
Anna,
question. Yes.
Melissa Kasnitz just raised her hand.
Oh, okay. Melissa, go ahead.
Thanks. I know Melissa for the Disability Advocates, I think we've been clear on what we recommend for the pending advice letters. I believe, I just want to clarify, we're not asking that the previously approved advice letters be revisited at this point, just the ones that have not yet received a determination.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay. So moving on to the reporting requirements of prescheduled waived trips, the question reads, how should data on the use of prescheduled waived trips be reported to the commission? So I know many of the parties want them separated, but are there any other additional comments or questions, clarification? Okay. I don't see anything in the TNC Access inbox. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there are a couple. There's Autumn and then Alex Laro.
Go ahead, Autumn.
Thanks. We want to emphasize that the the data should be reported to the commission in a way that will be clear to the public what's happening. So either it's reported in a way that someone can look at the advice letter and see what's going on, or the commission take that data and put it out to the public in a way that's clear. That's especially true if the commission ends up deciding, let's see if skewing towards prescheduled trips is actually a problem before setting guardrails in place to make sure that doesn't happen. But even if the commission doesn't do that, it's really important to the disability community that the information on the accessibility of TNCs and the level of success of the Commission's efforts to address this program be public and easily available and understandable, so that it's clear, what level of service is the general public getting, what level of service are people with disabilities getting, and what's the extent of the difference between those, if any.
Thank you, Autumn. Alex, you have your hand up?
Hi, yes, this is Alex Laro, Reg Legal Counsel for Uber. First, I just wanted to thank everybody for the comments today and for the proposals, and the CPED for its work here. I just wanted to mention on this data reporting question in particular, we spelled out our position in our written comments. We think that reporting would work within the existing framework. Generally, we're not opposed to separating out the data, but I just wanted to mention that there could be additional sort of administrative burdens created that would arise from reporting data in separate advice letters, including, leading to the reporting of duplicative information in some instances, and then potentially cause further delays in processing advice letters. As the current reporting framework already creates significant administrative burdens for both TNCs and CPED, we just wanted to stress that we should not duplicate those if possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Reagan?
Just a follow-up for disability on the reporting requirements. I should say disability advocates and the reporting requirements. Do you think that reporting requirements for prescheduled trips that mirrors the current reporting requirements for on-demand trips would suffice, or are there any other metric areas that you want to that is specific to prescheduled trips that needs to be addressed and should be required? Just to refresh everyone's memory, under the current framework, we have reporting for response times that are reported, in deciles, and we have, the number of available waves, on-demand waves at a certain hour of the day. We do have reporting for outreach and marketing efforts, as well as complaints. And so is there any other areas that you think should be looked at in terms of data reporting?
This is Autumn for the disability advocates. I think we would want to make sure that the data reported adequately captures completion rates. So, to the extent that there's any nuance there, we would want to make sure that the reporting paints a true picture of, if you want a prescheduled wheelchair accessible ride, were you able to get it or not? And so we'd want to make sure that it didn't exclude any trips that weren't completed. So, for example, if the completion, if the prescheduled trip request was made and then denied quickly, that should be reported. That should be included in the reporting. If you were told, like, yes, we'll get one, and then one of the contingencies that Janae mentioned, the driver didn't turn on their app, or they didn't show up, or whatever, and so you got canceled at the last minute. We'd want to make sure that none of those reasons for non-completion of the ride were excluded. We want to make sure it was a complete picture. We can take a closer look at the data to see if we have any more specific or granular recommendations. I raised the point I did earlier because we had in the past made recommendations to the commission that the commission ended up not adopting, that would have made the reporting clear and more accurate. So, for example, reporting by zip code as opposed to county-wide, to make the reporting more meaningful in counties that are as large as Los Angeles, for example. So I suppose while we still stand by those previous proposals and recommendations, um, we're not suggesting a complete overhaul of the data reporting, but hope that when the commission designs the reporting requirements, it's done with an eye to making sure that all the relevant data is captured, and B, that it's something that the general public and the disability community can easily review and understand what's going on.
And this is Melissa. The only thing to add to Autumn's discussion is making sure that the reporting is structured in a way that allows consideration of comparability. So we want to make sure that we get the same data for non-wave pre-scheduled rides, including what proportion of trips are pre-scheduled versus on demand. As we mentioned earlier, we think that's a relevant statistic to make sure that there isn't an inappropriate push for wave riders to rely on pre-scheduled rides at the exclusion of on-demand, but also making sure that we can see if on-time arrivals, and I think there's a consensus that time we miss is measured from the time that the trip is requested for and the vehicle arrives, but that on-time arrivals are comparable, and that completion rates are comparable. So we do need all of the data for non-wave pre-scheduled trips to allow that comparison.
I can and I can add on the issue of comparability, um, that the commission should be collecting data and requiring the TNCs to report any extent to which there are discrepancies between what's offered to people who use wheelchairs and what's offered to the general public. So, for example, if you have to schedule wave rides 48 hours in advance, but there's not a similar limitation on standard pre-scheduled rides. If pre-scheduled rides are only available 9 to 5 for wheelchair users, but they're available much broader hours for the general public, that's information that should be collected and reported.
Thank you, Melissa and Annette. Sorry, I was looking at Annette's name. Autumn. Annette, you have your hand up?
It was pretty much similar response to what the disability advocate said, but I think what's really important is the completed trips, being clear on how many of the trips that were requested with the pre-scheduled service were completed. And then also, I think what they talked about, which was the time elapsed between the requested time, say, the day before it was requested for 3 o'clock the next day, and it arrived at 3:05, then knowing that 5-minute, response time after. I think that those are the most important things. And we, included that in our comments in terms of it's somewhat different than the on-demand service, because it can be, in a sense, dispatched ahead of time. You can be closer to the pickup location, so it's much more likely that you're on time for a pre-scheduled trip. Notwithstanding that, of course, there could still be traffic or other kinds of things that can't be anticipated, but it's easier than, a demand response where you don't know exactly where the vehicle is when somebody, or where the vehicles are going to be when someone requests a trip. Thanks.
Thank you, Annette. Lower your hand. Any follow-up questions or additional comments? Someone's raising their hand. Oh, Annette, you still have your hand raised? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm lowering it, sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
it's the button is not very or it's a little sensitive. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Okay. So I guess before we move on to to the public comments, any other final words?
I'm
Okay.
manually raising my hand. This is Genevieve Shiromai. I just wanted to thank everyone for the presentations, for the questions, for the comments, and the team and I will definitely take in everything that folks have contributed today towards fashioning this next installment of the program, and for members of the public who call in, appreciate everyone's time. Thank you, and back to you, Anna and Tara. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So now I want to go into our next agenda item. Reagan.
Thanks, Anna. And so we're now moving to the last item on today's agenda, which is hearing comments from the public. We're allotting about 35 minutes for public comments. Before we begin, let me just go over again I guess some administrative items here, just so everyone can participate fully. It's the same as it's already been covered earlier, but I just want to mention this again. You just we'll use the use the raise hand feature to if you want to make comments, and then you can call on your name. Please identify yourself, and if you're affiliated with any organization, please mention that as well. So after speaking, please lower your hand. Let's see here, and so let's. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to make comments regarding any issues that we've covered in this workshop?
Go ahead, Helen.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you all. I just want to make clear that during this meeting, I have tried numerous times to order pre-scheduled rides from both Lyft's Access and Uber's Wave, and have been able to do so. This is not an issue with my phone or the company's apps. I have had no difficulty scheduling rides like this on either app prior to 2022. So for both companies, I want to communicate that. Prior to 2022, we would use both apps regularly, mostly Lyft though. We weren't finding Uber as reliable, but my family has had a wonderful experience with the Lyft Access rides, both pre-scheduled and on-demand rides in San Francisco. Very nice drivers, safe drivers, considerate drivers. They are so sweet with my young daughter in her wheelchair and with me as I ride along with her. We tip very well in response, and I think it's really a feel-good win-win experience all around. I really do. I think these drivers like driving these Wave and Access vehicles. I think they feel really good about providing this particular service, and my family in turn is very grateful for being able to call a waiver and access ride, and to go someplace all together with my daughter instead of either my wife or I staying home with my daughter. So I'm so grateful for that, and I want to make sure I communicate that to all of you. I want to thank in particular Aaron and Annette from SFMTA and Autumn from Disability Rights California and Melissa. Thank you all really at this meeting, because I forget sometimes that there are such people of good faith coming together to figure this out equitably for people like my daughter and my family who, again, just want full access to TNCs like other families. Lastly, please don't think that little public comment or minimal community organizing or a lack of a coordinated email campaign, etc., are reflective of there not being any demand for these wheelchair accessible vehicles, whether they're pre-scheduled or on demand. Frankly, I only know about these commission meetings because of my position in the disability advocacy community in San Francisco. And frankly, I also only learned of these waive and access options at Uber and Lyft because of that same position in the community. I'm still not sure where all the marketing is that's alerting the community to the waive and access rides. I've literally never seen any. I just know that these waive and access options are listed at the end of a long list of ride options on these apps. Imagine how many more people would care about this issue, who would speak up if only they knew about it, or if only they could. Because that's another point, and one of my last ones I'd like to make today. The disability community is unique in that not every member of the community who wants to advocate for accessibility and equal treatment can, because of the very disabilities they have. My daughter doesn't speak. I am her voice. My daughter doesn't walk. So I march for her. Please don't let the fact that there may be few or no public comments besides mine today or at future meetings mean no one cares about this issue, that TNCs don't need to be accessible to the disability community. The disability community needs allies, people who can and will speak up for them for their equal treatment in our shared society. The commission can be that ally. Please be that ally. Thank you for being that ally.
Thank you so much, Helen, for that for the comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to make comments on the issues that we covered today?
This is Anna. I have actually, I guess I'm a little bit confused because Helen said she was able to request a waive. She was able to schedule a pre-schedule a waive ride through Uber. However, I thought Uber did not provide that service. So maybe Uber can speak to that. Is Uber offering pre-scheduled waive rides?
Hi, Anna. This is Alex Laro again. It's my understanding that we have not ever enabled this option for Wave users specifically. It's certainly something that we are actively looking into, as we mentioned in our comments.
Okay, thank you.
We still have quite a lot of time for a lot of probably comments, so we'll, I guess, hold on, wait until someone wants to add more comments to our and then shall we wait for the full remaining 25 minutes?
We've actually left the public comment open until 1 p.m., which we can remain available for, given that the published agenda set aside, I think it's 12:25 to 1 p.m. for that, and people may have planned around it. But that does make me think, okay, we actually have another hand. And then if public comment is quiet for now, to respect everyone's time, I think after we get Autumn's comment, Anna, let's give an overview of the remaining schedule for anyone who needs to drop off before the rest of the public comment period. And then we'll stay on the line. So Autumn, let's go to you first.
This is Autumn. I was just going to suggest maybe we see what comments there are among the folks that are on now, and then recess until the beginning of the agenda comment period. I think it's 11:20 or 12:25 or something like that. So, you know, maybe have a little recess and then come back.
That's a good
That
suggestion.
was my suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds good. Let me ask, Helen has her hand raised at the moment.
Hi, yeah. My wife Blue in Quito, my daughter's other mother, also has a comment. Here she is. Take it away, Blue.
Hi, everyone. My name is Blue in Quito, and I am the mother of Betta, who is 11 years old, severely disabled, and depends on us for every moving part of her. And I can say that living in San Francisco, not having a wheelchair accessible van, that Uber and Uber Wave and Lyft Access have essentially saved my daughter's life many times, i.e. Being able to take her to the nearest emergency rooms and having dependable people and trustworthy people that are driving those vans. And although we could take a bus, although we could walk, in these situations, I don't think we could have, gotten her to the hospital in time, etc. Also, we have a car, but she is over 85 pounds now. Her wheelchair is about 75 pounds. So I'm 5'2", and she's almost as tall as me at this point in length. So putting her into a car that's not accessible is not only dangerous for her, but dangerous for the person trying to lift her into the back seat of the car. So again, Uber and Lyft Access have been indispensable and life-changing for our families, for our family. And although we have an option as well to purchase an accessible van for our family, we would still be, out about $40,000 to $50,000, just to pay for that van. And the $20 one-way fares with Lyft and Uber are a considerable savings. So, I do appreciate that they appreciate that the able-bodied population of San Francisco has access to them. So why not the disabled body or the, families like us and my daughter? So yeah, that's all I would have to say.
Thank you, Blue, for your comments. I know we're still waiting for others to join in. Tara, what time do you think we should recess and come back for the actual for the 12:25 to 1 period?
Yeah, let's keep the 12:25 to 1 period. So we'll take a recess now until 12:25. We'll keep the WebEx active, but for anyone who wants to make public comment, we'll be back at 12:25. I'm sorry, Anna. Let's give an overview of the schedule. I'm sorry I cut us off a little early. For anyone who does have to leave, I wanted to make sure you got this overview as well. And then we'll go to recess.
Sorry. Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to bring your attention the track 5 schedule of what's coming up next. So comments on proposals and today's workshop will be due on March 1st. And then reply comments on proposals on today's workshop will be due March 11th. The ruling or PD on the pre-scheduled issues will be released sometime in Q2 of this year. And that's it for me. Any questions about that?
I had one, Anna. I just wanted to clarify, this is Annette Williams. So March 1st is comments on the written proposals and March 11th on the workshop. It sounded like you said both the first time, so I was just confused.
So the first one is for the proposals and today's workshop. And then
That's March 1st.
March 1st, yeah.
Correct. And then March 11th, that's what I was confused about.
Sorry, and then March 11th would be reply comments on the proposals and the workshop.
Reply comments on
Sorry,
the comments that
reply comments on the
It's
comments.
on the comments that come on March 1st. Okay, that's where I got lost. I've got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we will have a short recess until and reconvene at 12. Is it 12:25? But I will keep the WebEx on, and the recording will I will pause the recording for now until 12:25. Thank you all.
We will start. I just want to remind that we are resuming the recording of the rest of the workshop. So welcome back again, everyone. We will resume on the public comments. But before we do that, let me just go over again the housekeeping rules. For everyone who wants to make a public comment, we will be using the raise hand feature in your WebEx screen, which is found below the bottom of the screen next to the smiley face. So just press that if you want to make comments, and then staff will call you. And once you're called, please introduce yourself and if you're affiliated with any entity or organization. We will also monitor the chat box, so if you can't verbally make comments, you can type it on the chat box, or you can also email us at tncaccess@cpuc.ca.gov, and staff will read your comments. I think that's about it. And so let's start public comments. We have until about 1 o'clock allotted for public comments. And so for those who just joining us and want to make public comments related to the issues covered in this workshop, please raise your hand through the hand feature. again, for those who are just joining us and want to make public comments regarding the issues that we covered today, please feel free to raise your hand. We will keep the line open until 1 o'clock. We'll remind everyone every 5 minutes until 1 o'clock. And Again, for those who just join us, if you want to make public comments related to any issues that we covered today, please feel free to raise the hand or to click on the hand feature in your WebEx screen, and staff will acknowledge you. We'll keep the line open until 1 o'clock. We have about 10 minutes left in our public comment portion of the workshop. For those who just joined us and want to make comments, please feel free to click on the raise hand feature in your WebEx or type on the chat box and staff will unmute you or call your name. Thank you. We have about 4 minutes left for those who want to make comments related to the issues we covered today. The line is open until 1 o'clock. So feel free to raise your hand if you want to make a comment. So we are at the 1 o'clock mark here, and any last comments? So that concludes our public comment portion of the workshop. I will turn it over to Anna for some final remarks. Anna?
Thanks, Reagan. So just one more time, I wanted to again bring your attention to the Track 5 schedule. Comments on proposals in today's workshop will be due March 1st. Reply comments on the opening comments will be due March 11th. The ruling or PD on the pre-scheduled issues will be released sometime in Q2 of this year. So that concludes our workshop. We hope you find today's workshop to be informative, and we look forward to the comments and reply comments in a few weeks. We will review today's recording, and if the recording is clear, we'll post it on the website. For those who presented that had a slide deck, I believe it was only Lyft. Please send me your slide deck so I may post it along with today's recording. This concludes our workshop, and thank you again for participating. Looking forward again to your written comments. I will now stop the recording. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.